welcome to Korean Cinema Today, the podcast of the Korean Film Council. Here in Seoul, this is Pierce Conran, and I'll be talking to you today about what's going on in the world of Korean cinema. Today we'll be having a special episode to commemorate the end of the year, and in the studio with us today we have film critic Darcy Paquet. So welcome, Darcy. Thanks for being here again.
Thanks for inviting me.
So Korean Cinema Today is a new podcast from KOBIZ, which is the online side of the Korean Film Council. To keep up with the latest news and check out interviews and features and more, please be sure to visit our website, which is koreanfilm.or.kr. You will also find there our webzine, which is also called Korean Cinema Today, as well as our newsletter, which you can subscribe to, and of course tune in again to this podcast. To find the podcast on iTunes, simply search for Korean Cinema Today. Please also find us on social media. We're on Twitter. The address is twitter.com/KoreanFilmBiz. That's B-I-Z. And also on Facebook, you'll find us at facebook.com/KOBIZ. It's KOBIZ.Kofic. KOFIC. So I am your host, Pierce Conran. I am a writer for the Korean Film Council. I write a lot of the news and features that appear on koreanfilm.or.kr. I am also the Korean correspondent for Twitch Film and the founder of Korean film blog, Modern Korean Cinema. So here we are at the end of 2013. It's been an enormous year for Korean film. Commercially speaking, it's the biggest year that we've had on record. So Darcy, thanks again for joining us. Darcy is, of course, the founder of KoreanFilm.org. He is the writer of the book New Korean Cinema Breaking the Waves, a consultant for the San Sebastian International Film Festival, the Udine Far East Film Festival, and he wears many, many other hats in this industry, including being an actor, of course. He was in last year's Cannes competition film, The Taste of Money by director Im Sang-soo. So, Darcy, it's been a huge year for Korean film. How do you feel here coming into 2014?
Well, I was really surprised again this year. 2012 was a surprising year in the sense that I felt that we'd sort of reached a plateau in terms of the commercial performance of Korean films. But 2012 was just a real big jump on any previous year before that. And so it set a new record in that year. And so, looking ahead to 2013, at the time I thought, well, we'll probably kind of settle back into normalcy in this year. Indeed, we've gone on and broken the record yet again. And so, I was reading an article recently about Korean musicals, and some commentator, a Korean commentator, was quoted as saying, like, in Korea, we have bubbles, but they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They don't burst. It makes me wonder if that's what's happening to the film industry.
It's certainly, and again, an enormous year, a huge jump already in 2012, and then a similar, if not bigger, jump again this year. Is it going to reach saturation points at any point? Or are we going to look at another, and even are we going to be here a year from now talking about the biggest year in Korean film again?
I don't know. I'm going to predict that next year we'll return, we'll settle back down somewhat into a more, I don't know. I don't expect another record-breaking year next year, but certainly I've been proven wrong in the past, and so we'll see. I think it's clear that the audience is expanding. And the reason that these records are being broken are not simply because there are a lot of, very commercially appealing films that are being made these days. And it's not just the content, but I think the fact that, older viewers are going to the theater much more often than they used to. It's much more common for parents to bring their children to the theater. And so that even though I think the most important demographic, like women in their 30s, that continues to be the case, but other demographics are becoming more important as well.
So the last year, the industry, by the year's end, powered to just under 115 million admissions just for local films at the box office. That was a significant jump. It was the first time that the year had ended over 100 million. Now this year, as of, I believe it was already November 29th, we broke that record. And so we're on track to reach a significant new benchmark. Let's looking at some of the films. The year started out quite strong. There was a huge hit came out of nowhere, Miracle in Cell Number 7. Ultimately recorded 12.8 million admissions and is currently the third highest grossing film in Korean film history. What did you make of that film's success? I know it took me off guard.
I was in the US at the time that it came out, and so I wasn't here to actually see it happen, but I mean, based on with the type of the film, I had no idea that it would be as successful as it was. I mean, you were here. What was your impression of that?
I wasn't expecting anything huge. There weren't any huge stars in it. I mean, at that point, Ryu Seung-rong had just come off a huge year after All About My Wife and Masquerade, particularly, where he took supporting roles, but those were big hits, and he was well regarded for those. He started getting some endorsement deals. Namja Ramyeon, I think, is one of the things I've seen him on television on.
Yeah,
and. So I wasn't expecting much. I thought it would do okay, and to be honest, I liked the cast a lot. There's some of my favorites like Oh Dal-soo, but these are all kind of supporting players. And so when it opened well, I don't think it opened over 1 million. I was like, oh, that's quite a lot. But it stayed over 1 million for I think 3 weeks, and that's certainly every week. I was surprised that it wasn't going down. If anything, it was going up.
Yeah, and this was a film that it certainly didn't get a lot of support from critics. I think that. More or less everybody acknowledged the talent of the actors involved, and I think nobody really criticized the level of the acting in the film, but there was a sense that it was fairly manipulative, that it was kind of pushing buttons as hard as possible, and so a lot of critics kind of resented the approach of the film, and I guess they felt it was too melodramatic and just too manipulative, but clearly the audience didn't mind, and word of mouth was very strong, and since everybody was talking about this film, I think that people were just lining up to get their own take on it.
Yeah, I certainly did manage to push those buttons in the end.
Yeah.
But I remember at that point, the film that I was excited for, and the one that I expected, and I think most people expected to be the big hit around the Sonal period, which is the Korean Lunar New Year, was Ryu Seung-wan's spy thriller, The Berlin File, which I think opened, it was either 1 or 2 weeks after Miracle in Cell Number 7.
Yeah. Yeah, and that film, it was also a success. I mean, I think that because it's standing next to this other film, it looks somewhat diminished by comparison, but I think it is the most commercially successful action movie in Korean history. So over 7 million tickets, and it was a very difficult film to pull off. I think they shot most of it in Europe. It was a film that featured some, spectacular action set pieces that just must have been really difficult to shoot. But they pulled it off quite well. I mean, there were some. I mean, this was another film that kind of divided critics in a certain sense. That some people felt that the story was too difficult to follow, or that I don't know, that maybe the endings, set pieces were too drawn out or whatever. But broadly, the film was, I think, well received, and internationally as well. It gathered quite a bit of attention.
It did, certainly. I enjoyed the film myself. I think my main problem with it was maybe some of the English dialogue in it, but
yeah.
It was, or rather, its delivery anyway. But before the film was being released, people were saying, yes, for 7 million, that's very successful. But people were spouting off that number that we always hear, 10 million. We were thinking this movie should make 10 million to be considered a huge hit. Now, it didn't reach that, but it still did very well. How important is that number these days, the 10 million admission mark?
I don't know. I think that there's been this sort of inflation in expectations, I think. I mean, 10 million used to be this kind of unreachable figure, that no one... It was only in 2004, with Shilmido and Taegukgi that finally that level was reached. But these days, since it's in the past few years, we've had, I think 2 per year at least. 2012 we had 2.
Just 2012 there were 2.
Okay, yeah.
I believe because, it's funny because Shilmido and Taegukgi happened at the same time in early 2004, both kind of war-themed films, reaching 10 million, quite extraordinary. But Shilmido was a 2003 film, so there's one from each year. Shilmido, Taegukgi 2005's King and the Clown, then The Hosts, and then it's until 2009 Haeundae, And then last year, of course, we had Thieves and Masquerade.
Yeah.
Which brings us now to, is that 8 now of Miracle in Cell Number 7?
Yeah, I think that was the 8th film to cross the mark. And I don't know, I mean, a lot of things have to happen for that to take place. It has to be a film that can appeal to a broad section of the population. It has to really be in the news, and a lot of people need to be talking about it. And so, I mean, Berlin File, in some ways, I think that was a bit too high of an expectation to put on the film because, it was an action film. It's certainly a film that appeals to a broad audience, but it's not the sort of film that that can really capture kind of the imagination of the entire country. And it's not, I mean, Taegukgi is a good example of a film about the Korean War. It's something that is really central to contemporary Korean history. And, a lot of older viewers who remembered the war were going back to the theater for the first time in, 40 years in order to view this film. Shilmido is based on a real life experience. And there was something very distinctly Korean about all these other films that did cross the 10 million admissions mark. Whereas Berlin File, it struck me as kind of a more international production that it could appeal to Koreans, but also just as well to, viewers in other countries. And I think that explains the predominance of English and other, language dialogue in the film. And so I think that from the beginning, I think that people were a little bit too expecting too much for this film to reach 10.
A little bullish, maybe. It's not your typical 4-quadrant film in some senses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so looking at these 10 million films, you would expect in the biggest year ever of Korean film there to be a whole number of 10 million films that reached the 10 million admissions mark. That wasn't the case. Miracle in Cell Number 7 was the only one that eventually made it over the mark. However, another 2 came very, very close, and both of them starring Song Kang-ho, Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer and Han Jae-rim's The Face Reader, reaching 9.3 and 9.1 million viewers, respectively.
Mm. I know it's been a great year for Song Kang-ho. He's got a new film coming out very soon, and so we'll see if he can turn that into a big hit as well. But, certainly Snowpiercer was a very unique film. It was the first Korean film ever attempted on this scale, and very different because most of the cast were, internationally recognized actors, and Song Kang-ho and Ko Ah-sung were the only Korean actors in the film. And this is a film that probably could have gone either way. If I could envision a few scenarios where the film would end up, failing spectacularly at the box office, but luckily it did seem to capture the imagination of the Korean populace, and so driven by word of mouth and curiosity, the film did really quite well. And whereas Face Reader, I think that it was a very well conceived and produced film. The central concept is something that sounds quite appealing, and it's the perfect Chuseok movie, where it's kind of, in some ways, it was building off the success of Masquerade last year, which was released at the same time of the year. It was another, Chosun Dynasty set film that, that took an interesting story and presented it in a very appealing kind of, with a big cast, and it was a film that appealed to a wide section of the audience. How did you feel about Face Reader personally?
I really enjoyed it. Now, I was quite excited about it because the cast was very impressive. I mean, Song Kang-ho, who I always love, and Lee Jong-jae, who has had a good year after a very, very strong turn in New World. Kim Hye-soo, who's done good work in the past. Baek Hyun-sik, who I always enjoy, and some other people. It's a strong cast, but really just the director. I think it's been a while since he made a film. His last one was in 2007. It was The Show Must Go On, with also Song Kang-ho, a gangster film, which I'm quite a big fan of.
Mm-hmm.
And his first was Rules of Dating, also a wonderful film with Paquet, and I forget the actress who starred alongside him.
Kang Hye-jung.
Right. And so 2 very, very good movies that take a well-established genre and kind of twist them in a very interesting way, the way we kind of we've expected Korean filmmakers to do in the past. So I was hoping the same thing would happen with The Face Reader. He doesn't. I wouldn't say he twists as much as with this one. It's a much bigger budget film. It's fairly controlled, but it's just so well made that it's very easy to kind of get into, and it's a fun period movie. It's a fun period romp, I suppose would be the word.
Mm.
And while not one of the viewer's best films, I think it's very fine commercial entertainment.
Yeah, I don't think you'll find a lot of critics putting it in their top 5 for the year, but certainly it was well made and well received, and I think most people felt it deserved its success.
Yes, it was So yeah, the success this year, there have been so many films. We've already discussed a few: Miracle in Cell Number 7, Snowpiercer, The Face Reader. The fourth biggest film was The Berlin Flaw, which we've already touched on. And the next one was also a film featuring Korean spies, Secretly Greatly, but the demographic for this one was slightly different. What did you make of that film?
Yeah, I mean, this is a film that, I don't know, it was based on a webtoon that was very well known. And so, I mean, from the beginning, it had a fair amount of name recognition, but of course it was really driven by star power, this film, and I think that it was the female audience that was lined up to see it.
It was an amazing packaging of kind of a fresh-faced K-drama stars. We had Park Ki-young, Lee Hyun-woo, and Kim Soo-hyun.
Yeah,
Kim Soo-hyun, of course, is enormously popular among a certain part of the population.
Yeah, I heard that. I mean, Kim Soo-hyun has more, I guess, commercial endorsements than any other actor. He set a new record for.
Really?
Wow. I forget the number, like 25 or 30 or I don't know how many.
My goodness, all at the same time.
Yeah.
So that film was enormous. I mean, it came very close to 7 million admissions, but it was a very front-loaded film, a term that we generally reserve for the American box office. But one day in particular, perhaps was it the Saturday or the holiday I think it opened in a week that there was a holiday.
Mm.
One of those days was the most successul day for a Korean film in one day.
Yeah.
So it set a record there, and again, no one expected it to do that well.
Yeah, I know. I'm critical of the notion that star power by itself, that there are many actors in Korea who by themselves can turn a film into a major hit. I think more often it's kind of a combination of the, interesting combinations of different actors and, how the actors kind of fit in with the overall story. But this does seem to be a case where just Kim Soo-hyun had so many fans. I mean, he was in The Thieves from the previous year, but in a smaller role. He was cast in that before he became a huge star.
It's particularly his roles in K-dramas that he's very well known for.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one that... it's been on TV that he's become a real superstar. And that this does seem to be a case where, I mean, if you take him out of the equation, then I'm sure that this film would just have been kind of a very modest success.
Now, is it also a question of timing? Were exams finishing at school around this time?
I mean, this was in June, and so, I think the university, university students were starting to see their time free up.
So a very similar thing happened last year, where was the end of the year and the end of year exams. You had the film A Werewolf Boy, which was kind of reaching a similar demographic and made pretty much the exact same amount of money, starring again another very big idol star, Sung Joong-ki.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So again, that timing seems crucial. I wonder if we'll see more films programmed like that in the future.
Yeah, the fall case is quite interesting because it's third-year high school students who have been studying, just putting intense amount of hours into preparing for this university entrance exam, which is held, on one day in November. And it's become kind of a tradition, you finish your exams and then you go out and you watch a movie on that night or in the nights after it. And so if you have the right kind of film that appeals to a young audience, then this is perhaps the perfect time to release it.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's been some assiduous scheduling from some of the big studios in the last year. Now, outside of these big ones, there were a huge amount of other films that reached the 5 million mark. All thrillers, actually. We're looking at Hide and Seek, The Terror Alive, Cold Eyes, and New World. All went over 5 million. A huge amount of thrillers this year, actually, at the box office, particularly in summer. We had, Cold Eyes was out in July, was a hit in early July. Then August, which was actually the most successful month of all time in Korea, over 20 million tickets were sold to Korean films in the month. And in that month were Hide and Seek, The Terror Alive, Snowpiercer, and also The Flu. So thriller is making a big impression at the box office this year.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, thrillers are a genre that producers always seem very hot on, and then they seem to think that it has a lot of potential. Although if you actually look, there aren't huge numbers of examples of really popular and successful thrillers in the past. I mean, The Chaser is one good example of a very successful film, but most thrillers, reach only this kind of modest level of, box office success. But this year, certainly, Hide and Seek was a film that really performed quite well, and it was an exciting film, but it, based on its cast or its story, you wouldn't normally think of this as a 5 million admissions film, but it reached that level. Cold Eyes, a remake of a Hong Kong film, Eye in the Sky, and I really like this film personally, Cold Eyes, and I was happy to see it become as successful as it did. I think making a good remake is really difficult. I think it's much more difficult than people realize, but this was a good remake, and so through word of mouth, I think this movie managed to become quite successful.
I recall, I believe you wrote this in your your column on Down, that one of the successful aspects of that film was that the main stars, who were all very well known, were cast against type.
Yeah, I found that interesting. Like Seo Kyung-gu, for example, is an actor he's very well known to Korean audiences. He's been in many successful films in the past. And it's not that he always plays the same character. I mean, he does have a range of different characters, but I mean, to me, he always comes across as this very kind of hot personality. I'm sorry, or there's something. I mean, he's very intense, but hot isn't the right word. There is kind of this coldness to him, actually. And what surprised me about this film here was that it was less intense. It didn't have the intensity that was typical of his characters, but it was also kind of warm-hearted in a way. He certainly didn't overdo it. It was a very relaxed performance, but you could feel his affection for, the people in his team in this performance, and that was something new for him. And so I was impressed by that. And Jung Woo-sung is another example where, his image in this film, it was kind of his first villain character, but it wasn't just the fact that it was a villain. It was also showing a different side of his image than we'd seen in the past.
It's I enjoyed the film quite a lot too, and a lot of that comes down to the cast. Other things I really enjoyed about the film were that I find that Seoul is an interesting location in films. Unlike New York or London or Hong Kong, it's not quite as recognizable, certainly not immediately. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard for local productions to kind of capitalize on the look of Seoul. This film, I felt did that very well, using the massive boulevards of Gangnam from these kind of high vantage points from which the antagonist, played by Jung Woo-sung, scopes out his robberies, and going down into the subway and these little alleys. It was using these kind of levels. I could really feel that they were shooting in Seoul.
Yeah, I agree completely, and it's interesting because again, this is based on a Hong Kong film, which. I mean, Hong Kong's a very different city than Seoul. It's much more vertical. It's much more compressed. You don't have these wide open spaces that you have in Seoul. And so I really like the fact that the filmmakers were able to move it to a completely different setting, but still to make the setting a really integral part of the film.
Definitely. So moving on then a little bit, we were talking a lot about box office, but that's not the only thing that's been going on in Korean film this year. As usual, Korean films have a very strong presence on the awards circuit. Many films getting lots of major awards this year. It all started at Sundance, where Oh Myeol's Jisoo, which had premiered at the Busan International Film Festival, earned the grand prize in the World Dramatic Competition.
Yeah, Jisoo. I was very happy to see this film succeed as well as it did, and to get the attention both internationally and in Korea. The Korean release was in March, and it was released first in Jeju-do, where the film, of course, it's based on the tragedy that took place there in the late 40s. And so it was very encouraging to see the audience in Jeju-do really support the film. It sold quite a few tickets there, and then more broadly, it drew much more attention than independent films normally do draw in Korea.
It went over 100,000 admissions. Right?
Yeah, which is blockbuster level for that
Absolutely.
type of a film. And it's an interesting film because it looks on a very kind of controversial, very upsetting historical incident, involving the massacre of civilians during this, very tumultuous time. And at the same time, visually, it's this sumptuously produced film. It's, gorgeous black and white photography. It feels at times that you're kind of like paging through an art book of photography. And so when it first screened at the Busan Film Festival, I remember some critics kind of questioning the director's approach and the combination of this very emotionally upsetting material with this very artistic visual style. And so there were some people who really embraced the film and some people who just felt that these two elements of the film didn't work together. But it seems that as time passed, that the detractors' voices are becoming more and more faint. And
absolutely,
this film is really, its reputation just continues to rise with time.
It was not one of the films that was, certainly for the kind of international segment of guests at Busan last year, it was not one of the films that was being discussed a lot during the festival. That was mainly national security and Pluto, if memory serves.
Yeah.
But the film did win 4 awards at Busan, and then of course it was heavily programmed after that. The big win in Sundance. It also won a month later the Cyclo d'Or, which is the grand prize at the Vesoul International Film Festival of Asian Film, which is in France. Later in the year, there were a number of festivals, a number of Korean films competing in festivals. At Cannes, there may not have been any feature films. Some people had hoped that Snowpiercer would get there, but it wasn't ready in time. But the short film Safe by director Moon Byung-gu won the short Palme d'Or. Did you have a chance to see that?
No, I actually haven't had a chance to see it yet. It's on my list, and I will watch it before the end of the year. But it was really encouraging to see this because every year there are a certain number of Korean shorts that were invited to the festival. I remember back in the late 1990s when Song Il-gon's movie Picnic, it won the special jury prize in the short film category. And that was the first time that a Korean film had ever won an award at Cannes. And so this is the first time for a Korean film to win the sort of a top.
The Palme d'Or. But there have been a few awards for short films in the last few years. This is the second one for this director.
Yeah.
He won the top prize from it was the International Critics Week, might have been the third prize in the International Critics Week for the film Finis au Paris.
Yeah. And
then Shin Soo-won, who made Pluto, won the Canal Plus Award for her short Circle Line, which I really like.
Yeah.
That was at last year's Cannes. Beyond that, Hong Sang-soo won Best Director for his latest film, Our Sun-hee, at the Locarno International Film Festival. So that's The Silver Leopard. Now, I love Hong Sang-soo. I love his films. Many do. Mm-hmm. And I'm very glad he won an award. He previously won the grand prize in the Un Certain Regard at Cannes for Ha 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 in 2010. But I don't think he'll ever win the major award at one of the big festivals. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah, and it's funny because in the early stage of his career, he was winning just tremendous number of festival awards with movies like Virgin Strip Bare by Your Bachelors and The Power of Gangwon Province. And his style he's found his style really since then, and it's completely unique. There's no other director working in Asia or in any other part of the world that makes movies quite in the same way that he does. At first glance, they may seem somewhat ordinary, but when you really kind of delve into them, you realize just how distinctive and interesting they are. But I do think there's something about his style that just, for whatever reason, it doesn't attract top festival awards, you need to have a kind of an unusual concentration of Hong Sang-soo fans on a jury in order to result in something like that happening. And I don't think that's any criticism of the director at all. I think that, certainly festival awards are not the ultimate judge of a film's quality.
The sheer amount of times that he gets his films get selected in festivals is incredible. Between him and Kim Ki-duk, they must have something like 100 selections in the last 2 years alone. Yeah,
it's true. But there's, in terms of like the emotional, the style of the film, they're somewhat, they're quiet. They're not really intense films. They're not films that kind of bring you to these, huge heights of, in terms of just the emotional experience of watching them. And I wouldn't call them cool and intellectual either, because I think that you can get emotionally involved in them. But I think it's natural that films of another style tend to get singled out for the top awards.
Right. There's something about a kind of a gripping drama, or like a very fun genre film, something that's more stands out a bit more. But Hong Sang-soo, very busy these days. He made two films this year. The first being Nobody's Daughter Haewon, which competed at in the main section of the Berlin Film Festival this year. Which was your favorite?
I am more partial, I guess, to Haewon, and I liked both of them. I've become in recent years just more and more of a Hong Sang-soo fan. As time passes, I'm falling deeper and deeper into his work. But yeah, there was some. Haewon, it sticks in my memory a bit more than the other film, and it's with his films, it's very personal. I think the way that people respond to his films, and so I wouldn't argue necessarily that I think that Nobody's Daughter Haewon is a superior film to Arsuni, but yeah, especially the character, I think, of Haewon was somewhat different from what we've seen in other films of his in the past. And there was something about just her youth and her ambition, and there was a lot of life in that character that I think attracted a lot of people.
Yeah, and that was a remarkable performance from Jung Eun-chae. Hong Sang-soo typically likes to favor the same recurring people. This was his first time casting her, though I believe she is going to be in his new film, which will appear at some point early next year. Who knows where?
Yes, one of his new films. There's always at least one or two.
I myself I love both. I was slightly more partial to Arsuni.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was I really liked the cast.
Yeah.
And I love Jung Jae-young, and to see him in a Hong Sang-soo film, I thought it was a great fit for him.
Yeah.
So that one was I was quite keen on that. Running through any more awards, there's a few other things. Briefly going through them. The Fake, the new Yeon Sang-ho animation, won the Best Animation at Sitges. It also won a prize at the Gijon International Film Festival, also in Spain. Sunshine Boys, which was from last year's Busan Film Festival, won the Best Screenplay in the Thessaloniki International Film Festival. Actor Cho Jae-young won Best Actor at the Fantasia Film Festival for Jung Kyu-hwan's film The Wait. And Mai Ratama, Yoo Ji-tae's directorial debut. Yoo Ji-tae, famous for being the villain in Old Boy. That film won at the Deauville Asian Film Festival. Then Lebanon Emotion from Jeonju picked up Best Director at the Moscow International Film Festival, while Intruders picked up the grand prize at the Hawaii International Film Festival. So a lot of films, a lot of awards. And just most recently, last week, Han Gong-ju, which is a big favorite of mine, I know you don't quite agree with me on this, it premiered at Busan 2 months ago, and won 2 awards there, and it won the grand prize at the Marrakesh International Film Festival, no less by a jury presided over by Martin Scorsese. So we've had quite a few films. There's been maybe a few trends in the films we've seen this year. We discussed thrillers already, but a lot of spy films. Already The Berlin File and Secretly Greatly. Last month we had Commitment. And in 2 weeks, there will be another one. Just on Christmas Eve, we'll see the premiere of The Suspect, the 4th big-budget North Korean spy film in one calendar year in Korea. Is it too much?
Perhaps it is. I think that it's beginning to feel a little bit tired, and I've noticed some comments from other Korean critics as well that, I thought we'd run the course of these films, but there's another one yet. And I mean, in one sense, it's a topic that works both with the local audience, and it's perhaps easier to sell to an international market. And for these, big budget genre films like The Suspect, for example, I'm sure that this might help its international prospects somewhat. But I do hope that we move on. And there's something that feels slightly unreal about these films. And, I have no direct experience of ever meeting a spy from North Korea or anything else like that. And certainly it's not entirely fantasy as well, because we know that, espionage is kind of a fact of life, between these two countries. But when watching the films, you don't really get a convincing sense that this is something that relates to ordinary experience.
Certainly. And so two of them were very successful. Berlin Foster did greatly, Commitment not so much. Jury's out on Suspects. We'll find out by the end of the year. In other major news, of course, the Korean Film Council moved down to Busan this year after 40 years in their offices in Seoul. You've been involved with KOFIC for quite a long time. How do you feel about the move?
I know it's really interesting to see them down in Busan. I mean, I've been down a couple times since their move, and it's strange to see them located there. But I think it reflects the fact that Busan is becoming more and more important as a city, not only a location for Korean productions and occasionally foreign productions, but just also a place where there are a lot of post-production facilities and the Busan Film Festival, of course. And certainly the city of Busan is very anxious to kind of increase its importance in the future. And so, in the sake of diversity, perhaps it's nice to see them in Busan. Certainly logistically it may make it more difficult in some respects, to have meetings and things. But I think that from one perspective, it's certainly a positive development.
I haven't been down myself yet. How are the new digs?
Quite open and comfortable. They've got a great view.
Good. Yeah, they seem quite high up there. Right in Hyundai, or in the Centrum area, where just beside where the festival.
That's right. You can look out the window right onto the the festival main venue for the Busan Film Festival.
Oh, that seems the perfect place for it.
Yeah.
So KOFIC is busy, as always. This year they've been doing a lot, involved with a lot of films, supporting a lot of festivals. They've also had some showcases at the Sao Paulo Film Festival back in November, and earlier this year they were also at the Moscow International Film Festival. Now they're involved with China a lot these days. They set up a business center in Beijing. They're trying to initiate a lot of projects there. And they're preparing to sign a co-production treaty with the country. What do you think about this move, all this kind of this talk of co-production these days?
Well, it's interesting because all around the world, everybody's interested in becoming more involved in China. Their box office is, expanding at a tremendous rate. It already is one of the most important, markets in the world, and it's only beginning. And I find it interesting because I think maybe for cultural reasons, maybe just because Korea was early to the process. I think that Koreans have been more successful with productions and with various forms of cooperation. There have been co-productions that have been very successful in China, and so I'm optimistic about the future of cooperation between South Korea and China, and co-production treaty is an important step in that process. It may smooth out the process for these producers who are looking to make films with China. So that's something that definitely we'll be seeing more co-productions in the future, and it will be a trend that we'll continue to follow.
Given the respective size of the countries, one would think that Korea has a lot more to gain into accessing the Chinese market than China does accessing the Korean one. Then perhaps what China gets out of the bargain is access to great Korean talent. A lot of visual effects artists and behind the scenes people have already been involved in various Chinese films, such as the new Detective D film. I believe there's a lot of Korean visual effects specialists involved with that.
Yeah, talent and know-how as well. I mean, both in terms of technical things like you mentioned, and production know-how also. I think that Korea now is into its 15th year of strong growth, whereas for China it's earlier in the process, and so producers in China may have something to learn from cooperating with Korean producers. It's obviously they're two very different countries and very different settings, but I think one benefit to these type of co-productions is that the people involved often learn a lot through the process.
Absolutely. So I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about China in the same breath as Korean cinema in the near future. So at the end of the year, a big ritual for people like us is to pull out our pens and paper and jot down lists, look at recap what we've seen over the year, and come up with our top 10s or something like it. I noticed that you tweeted recently that you had seen 80 films this year, and we're getting ready to put down your list. Last time I heard, you were on 14. Have you managed to whittle it down somewhat more?
Somewhat, yes. I have a top 5. The Cine 21 has a yearly feature where they ask different critics to submit a top 5, and then they put them all together and figure out the most critically acclaimed films of the year. And so I don't know what other critics are saying, but for me, Snowpiercer is my number 1 film.
We're in agreement there.
Okay, yeah. So for you as well. And this is a film that I guess, in Korea, it's been somewhat of a mixed response. I think that some critics really liked it, other critics were a little bit more hesitant about the film, or more critical, but internationally the critical consensus seems to be more broadly positive. My number 2 film was The Fake, the animated film by Yun Sang-ho. I was just really impressed by its ambition and by the mood of the film. And I'm just really excited to see this director it's his second film, and I think that this really kind of marks him out as a really important director to watch.
Definitely. His next film, which he was shopping at the market in Busan this year, it's called Seoul Station. It sounds very, very interesting as well.
Yeah, it's a zombie film of a sort, I guess. It's not a typical zombie film, but it kind of mixes genre elements and some very dark social elements as well.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I'm really quite excited about that one.
Yeah. What's your number 2 film?
I don't know what my number 2 film is, or well, maybe I do, and maybe we're not going to agree on this one. The film that I had the strongest reaction to this year, in large part because I wasn't expecting it at all. It was in Busan. It's a debut film called Han Gongju. Now, it's hard to talk about the film without spoiling it. Spoiling may not be the right word, but the film is about a girl who has to, and following an incident, must change schools, and in her new environment where she doesn't live with her parents anymore, and she's reluctant to make friends, and there's something has happened, you don't know what it is, and when that gradually is teased out towards the halfway point, it actually becomes horrifically upsetting. A terrible thing happens, and it involves sexual violence. There's been a lot of those films in Korea recently. A lot of them I felt didn't treat the subject so well. Another did, which I think we'll get to in a moment. But this one, it just floored me. I wasn't expecting it. I was watching a film which I thought was very well made up until that point. This kind of lilting air and quality, really impressive first directorial outing, just a very confident command of mise en scène, and on a very restricted budget, I imagine, and wonderful performances. And then this happened, which I don't want to tell you what it is, but I was just openly in tears in the theater.
Yeah.
I know I wasn't the only one. Other people had a very different reaction to the film and were quite upset by it.
Yeah, it's received quite polarized responses. This is a film that's based on a true story, and so you can't accuse the director of kind of making this up to sensationalize the topic. But certainly some viewers are very moved by the film, and others take issue with the way that it's presented to the viewer. And it did receive some awards in Busan. I did hear that there were quite heated discussions in the jury.
Really?
Regarding that film. And so I don't know what was the case in Marrakesh, where it did win the grand prize, but it's a film that has undeniable strengths. I was really taken with the lead performance in this film by the young actress, and I agree that the director has tremendous talent, but there was something about the film that I reacted very strongly against. And so I guess I'd encourage people to see it, I guess, but it was a film that made me angry in some ways.
I can completely understand that. I can see why it would be just upsetting in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
So going further down the list, I already mentioned another film that did well or approached sexual violence in a positive way was Hope.
Yes.
Would that be on your top 5 this year?
I don't have it on my top 5, but it was a film that I liked a lot, and this is also based on a true story, a story that is quite well known in Korea. It's quite an extreme case of sexual violence against a young girl. And so when I heard that this story was being made into a movie, I guess my reaction was very similar to most other viewers' reactions, in that, why would you want to make a film about this? And do I really want to go and watch this? And so, in a sense, there was a lot going against this film, but the director, to his credit, Lee Jun-ik, he handled it with great sensitivity. He kind of downplayed the sensational aspects of the story, and the real focus is on this family coming back together in the aftermath of the tragedy. And in that sense, I think it was really successful.
Yeah, I was surprised by the film as well. Again, I also didn't really understand why they wanted to make this. But it worked quite well. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Enjoyed some parts. Other parts were just very hard. But it was a very well put together film, very thoughtful and considerate, given the subject matter. We don't have a huge amount of time left, so let's try and finish these top 5s. What else is on your list this year?
Nobody's Daughter Haewon is on my list. I'm compiling my list among the films that were released this year, and so Sleepless Night, which premiered last year in Cheonju, is on my top 5 as well. And the last one is it's categorized sometimes as a romantic comedy, although it's not really a romantic comedy in the way it approaches its plot. But the movie Very Ordinary Couple, it's a debut film by a director named No Dok, and just really impressed me in it. It was a film that kind of skirted the line between, it was a very commercial project, but she managed to do something quite fresh with the story. And the characters were very memorable. And so at the end of the year, when I look back on the films that I've seen, on these 80 films that I've seen, that's one that really kind of sticks out in my memory.
All great films. Sleepless Night in particular, I'm a huge fan of. I ranked as my favorite last year. Slightly different categorization for what makes each year's list. Beyond that, a top 5, I don't know what I could say. I really liked Pasha and Nonfiction Diary at Busan. Not to mention the documentary Mansion, I was very impressed by, which was the opening film for DMZ Docs, directed by Park Chan-kyung, Park Chan-wook's brother. It's a shaman docudrama, which is very, very dynamic and immersive, and I felt my body moving in the theater. It was a great experience.
Yeah, I like that film a lot too. I was impressed.
Okay, so lots of great films this year, and we hope for more next year. What do we have to look forward to in 2014?
A lot of period films, it seems. Big budget period films. I think that producers, noticing the huge success of Masquerade and more recently The Face Reader, I think that they're hoping to continue this trend in 2014.
So we have, we have maybe first up might be Kundo, which is starring Ha Jong-woo and Kang Dong-won. That's his first film after his military service. Directed by Yoo Jong-bin, who did Nameless Gangster last year, kind of bandits in Chosun era setting. We have Memories of the Sword, big star pairing of Jeon Do-yeon and Lee Byung-hun, not to mention Kim Go-eun, who was a breakout star in Eun-gyo last year. what else is there this year? There's Huntresses, kind of a Charlie's Angels set in the Joseon Dynasty, I think.
Yes.
Starring Ha Ji-won and Kang Ye-won, and I forget the third actress. Then Pirates, I think it's the Pirates of the Caribbean for Korea with
Son Ye-jin.
Son Ye-jin, yeah. And lots of period films. Oh, and how could I forget the Battle of Myeong. It's a hard one for me.
Yeah, with Chae Min-chi.
Yes.
Yeah, and so this is another retelling of the life of Lee Sun-shin, Korea's most famous admiral.
So a lot of period movies, some huge hits last year and this year with Masquerade and Face Reader, but with so many, maybe 5 with over $10 million budgets, is there space for all of them to succeed in the market?
We'll see. As if they're spread out well enough, I mean, it's conceivable that all of them may do fairly well. But certainly that Korean cinema does go through its booms and busts, especially the blockbuster genre itself. There have been many examples of failed blockbusters in the past, and so perhaps among these films that may happen again, but we'll see.
So you mentioned at the beginning of this episode you foresee perhaps a certain leveling off this in next year for the box office in Korea.
Yeah, it just seems that at some point gravity has to take over. Things have to move back to normal, but I don't know. It's certainly there's a lot of momentum in the Korean film industry right now, and so I wouldn't go so far as to predict a bad year for next year, certainly, but I think that the level of growth and the constant record breaking has to end at some point.
Definitely. So it's been a great year for Korean film, and hopefully exciting times ahead in years to come. That'll keep our jobs interesting anyway.
Yes.
So Darcy, thank you so much for being in the studio with us again today. I'm sorry to cut this short. This has already gone on for a while, but I feel we could talk for a lot longer. So thank you very much. And that concludes our special episode of Korean Cinema Today. Remember to visit us at koreanfilm.or.kr to tune into the podcast again and to check out the latest news, interviews, and features on Korean film.